All right, what's up, everybody? So, got some good progress here. I got the new binding put on. I got the bridge post holes plugged and the stop tail holes plugged. I've still got a couple little minor spots. I'll show them to you. When I'm doing the sanding, I'm looking more closely at every little tiny part of the guitar. So anytime I spot a little flaw, I put something on it just to mark it so I don't forget about it. So I'll show you the post holes first. I cheated. I plugged them with a hardwood dowel and I left them just a little tiny bit shallow, less than a 1/16. And then I filled over top of it with epoxy resin, and then I sanded that flush. I had a little dimple after I sanded, so I had to do it twice, but they came out great. I can still see one of them. I can still see the one right where the point of that piece of tape is. Let me get the light out of the way. All right, can we see it? See that circle right there? So it still feels like it's a little tiny bit low. I kind of feel like that's gonna fill with my base color coat. Talk about that in a minute. That was one of the repairs right there. You can see where I think it's filled enough that the base color coat will cover that. Now these, I can't see any of them, but I can still feel every single one of them. I don't want to keep sanding and sanding and sanding because I'm just going to keep opening up the same problems. I think it's flat enough now. Maybe I got to do a little more sanding right here on this one. This was that big triangle one. I'll do a little more sanding on some of them, but I'll just use like an 800 wet or dry, and hopefully that's going to smooth it out enough that I don't have to do any more repairs to the front of this. What you're seeing is you're seeing the primer coat underneath. One coat and one coat only, and that really sucked in, and then a color coat on top of that. So that's one of the repairs there. It just needs a little more sanding, and then one more color coat. The holes, man, the holes came out great. Maybe you can see that one just a little bit right there, but it's going to have another coat on top of it. And then, of course, this area here had the repair, so it still feels like it's got a little wave in it right here, so a little more sanding. I definitely got more sanding to do in here on that color coat. Can you see it? Because I try to keep the wet paper away from anywhere there's a glue joint, right? And I try to also keep it away from where the holes have been drilled out, because it's just raw wood in there, and that can suck water in. It can raise the grain, and then when you're sanding, the grain is raised, and you wind up sanding all your primer off of there. So I just dry sand. I'll dry sand that, and I'll dry sand that area there. And there was, that's the other repair area right there. It feels really good. Why do I got a tape on there if it feels, because I've sanded through the primer. Yeah, you can see it. So I've sanded through the primer right there, so that definitely needs more of a top coat. The headstock. That's looking pretty good, but definitely needs another coat. So the reason for the blue, why is it blue? Is this going to be the finish? No. Kind of looks like like a pair of really worn out jeans, doesn't it? It's almost cool, almost. But the reason for the blue is because this is going to be an epoxy resin top finish. And then I'll, of course, lacquer it to give it that gloss that everybody wants. But because it's an epoxy resin top finish, I will only use solids to tint the resin. I will not use dyes or inks because you're adding moisture, you're adding a different liquid to the resin and the hardener, right? So it changes the way that the epoxy resin cures. You're kind of thinning it out. Think of it like you're thinning it out with dyes or inks. And dyes or inks are solids, but they're suspended in some kind of a liquid, right? So you're changing that ratio of hardener to resin. And that's why I will only use solids. Now when you mix solids, I'll use a mica powder. When you mix the mica powder into the resin, it's going to look like it's perfectly consistent because you stirred and stirred and stirred and stirred. But when you start laying that resin across the top of the guitar, there's going to be places where you have less solids than other places. And when that happens, it's possible to see through the resin under the right lighting at just the right angle. So that's the reason for the color coat on here. I got to do one more color coat and I will sand again, probably with like an 800, and then I got to let it sit for a week because I can't put epoxy resin on a soft paint. This is a metallic paint, so it's already got a lot of solids in it. And if I have a couple, like, if I have little areas like that right there where you could still see some of the primer underneath, I don't care about that. As long as I got 95% of this covered in blue, I'm not going to worry if I got a little bit of sand through in some areas where I have the black, because it's going to be dark blues, like mid blues, dark blues, and then a pearl. But it's looking really good. The binding came out really good. I really didn't have any problems with it. The channel for the old binding was super clean. I took a 220 grit paper and just real quickly went around it and made sure there was no glue. You know, if there's like little bumps of glue, it'll hold your binding out so that it's not sitting tight in the channel. But when I pulled the binding off, like the glue all stuck to the binding, and it was pretty light anyway. So I just use a super glue, like a medium weight, not that watery thin super glue, because I don't want that stuff oozing down the side of the guitar. I had such a nice clean channel. If it had been necessary, I would take that real thin super glue and I would go back if I had any gaps in between the binding and the wood. But I didn't have any gaps at all. That corner came out really good. The way that I do that is I plug in my soldering iron, and as soon as I plug it in, I don't use the tip of it, I use the shaft part of it because it's a little bit of a bigger diameter, and I just roll over where that bend is. You know, I got it glued and taped. Start it here, so I got it all glued and taped up to here. And then I just heat this corner up just a little bit while the iron is still heating up so that it's not, 400 degrees. And while it's heating up, I keep testing the flexibility of that part of the binding where it's going to bend around that corner. I think I heated it up a little tiny bit here, and I don't even heat. I was done with the soldering iron at that point. It went right in. It was very clean, very nice, very neat. I don't think I have any spots that I'm gonna have to fill. If anything, I might have to do a little bit of fill right in here because I had to dig all this out with a knife and a real small chisel, but it came out pretty good. Maybe a little bit in this area right here, but I won't even use filler for that. I'll stick some binding and some acetone and melt it down, and then I'll take the goo and I'll just rub the goo in to close that joint between them. I probably should have scraped the paint off of it before I showed it to you guys, but see if you can see it. Oh, there you go. It looks really clean. It looks so much better than that stripe of paint that was in there. I got the neck adjusted so that it's perfectly straight just because I was checking for the height of the bridge, because I'm going to add just a little, like a half a mil of thickness to it when I put that epoxy on there, but I've got some room. So good progress, man. Check out those holes. Those plugs came out really good. I'm glad I didn't use the plug and sand it down flush, because it's just edge grain of the plug, and it seems like no matter what you do, your finish just keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking into that. Even the epoxy resin shrank into that, but I can't see any of them. You know, I know where they are because I put them in, except I can still see that one just a little tiny bit right under my finger, right the tip goes right over it just a little bit. So I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but I think one more color coat on the top of this, a real quick light sand, let it dry, let it cure, and then we're going to start putting the finish on this. That should be a really cool vid. I got to do it in two different pours. I'll do the top, and I can't do the headstock when I do the top because the headstock's got that angle on it, and the epoxy will run all down. You know, it'll just run downhill. So I just have to prop the guitar up after this is all set up. So I'll have to measure out my colorant, make sure I got the same amount of color in the resin for that side as I do for this side. But I mean, that's pretty easy stuff. Okay, I'm very proud of those fills. So I think they came out awesome. One more color coat, which I probably won't even show you guys. It's just gonna look like that. It's just gonna look like that. It's gonna have some areas where you can see the black, some areas where you can see that it's a little thinner, but it will be one solid color, and more importantly, it will be sealed. Last thing you want is for your epoxy resin to be sitting on there, soaking into the wood underneath, and then little air bubbles come up in your finish, and it makes it look terrible. I'm going to show you guys the last epoxy resin top I did. That is an epoxy resin top guitar. It's because it's a mahogany body, and I had grain filled it and grain filled it and grain filled it, and I was like, I'm over it. I'm done grain filling, so I broke out the epoxy resin, and this is what I got. This is a color shifting in the red. The gold, I really like the gold. Look at the structure in the gold. Is that cool or what? I'll show you guys the back of the guitar too. Here's the back of it. Almost looks like a marble. Here's the sides. Show you up close. You can see I used more red on the back than I did on the front because I didn't measure. I think I over-mixed on the headstock, but it still looks really awesome. Oh, that's a stutter button. Yeah, it's just kind of plain, so I wanted to give it something else cool. So I put the stutter button on there, and I never use it unless I'm like, yo, shut up over there. But there it is. That's pretty cool. So we'll do a different kind of a fill with this one, with different colors, different patterns in it than what we got going on here. This is very natural, like stone looking. This is going to be a little more modern than this one, but that's got the lacquer on top of it too, which is why I get that nice gloss that you don't always get with epoxy resin. This is a flat top guitar. That's an arch top guitar. I suspect we're going to have more gloss on this than we do on this because this is just flat. So next vid is going to be the pour, and then we'll lacquer it in, lock it in place, protect it, and we'll start finishing the rest of it. So check out the next one. Should be probably the best video in this series. That's all I got, guys. Peace.